Hey friends, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we want to help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. We're all about the next generation of churches, what it's going to look like, and how to reach the next generation. Love to have you join us at Stadia and be part of the Stadia tribe and the Stadia Church Planting services. Today on the Church Planting Podcast, this is just going to be flat out fun. The guest that we have on this episode is none other than Ricky Brown. Ricky Brown is a church planter. He is a jet pilot, and he is the recent author of a book called The 5 Hazardous Attitudes, Ways to Win the War Within. This is an exciting episode. It's a fun episode. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. So this is just really fun today as I have my friend and colleague and just an exciting guy on the Church Planting Podcast, Ricky Brown. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
Hey, Greg, excited to be here. Let's chop it up.
Okay, man. So, Ricky, you're involved in church planting, but you're also a jet pilot, man. And I guess there's kind of a corollary between being a church planter and a jet pilot. Talk about, man, jet pilot. What's up with that?
Yeah, so I started flying about 20 years ago, actually 22 years ago. And it was just a joy of mine. It's something I was constantly staring skyward, as they say. And so it wasn't until the pandemic when, church planting got really hard, and we were only 18 months old when the pandemic started. And we had planted a church that was 70% unchurched. Okay, wow. So as you know, normally when a new church is planted, it's about 42% unchurched. So we were 70% unchurched. And so when things got really hard in Chicago, they shut us down 2 years, So I looked in my toolbox to try to figure out, how was I going to pay the bills? And I said, you know what? I never did get my commercial license. I had my private license, but I never got a commercial. So I went back and I got my commercial pilot certificate, and I ended up flying a Hawker, which is an 8-passenger business jet for a charter company outside of the Chicagoland area. And so it was amazing. I will be honest with you, though. This definitely applies to church planting. A lot of pilots think that when I finally fly a jet and I'm going 550 miles an hour, 41,000 feet above the ground, then I'm really flying. But it was an airplane, to be honest with you. It was just like any other airplane, just a lot more responsibility. And so the link to church planting is, some people might think, when I get to 2 services or 3 services or multiple locations, then I'm really going to be doing ministry. I think you'll find out that there's always something else to reach for or to grasp for. So, yeah, aviation has been just a huge part of my life, and I enjoy flying.
Hey, so, it's one of the things we talk about a lot on here is caring for our soul. And, we talk about, church planters, we're wired kind of to drink rocket fuel, jet fuel. And there's that corollary as well. Man, how do you stay healthy when you're, planting, when you're a pilot, when you're drinking jet fuel?
Yeah. I think that the planters, the mission person, the ministry person, your number one priority is to tend to your soul. So, for example, I wish I could share a screen right now. I last night was in my backyard around my fire pit with a gentleman that has gone much farther in business than I have. He's gone much farther in ministry than I have. And Greg, before we knew it, 3 hours had passed. Wow. A conversation that bounced from marriage to ministry to money to just current issues and probing questions deep, not surface stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But deep questions. And so, for me, that's it. You will always see me having a power lunch. You'll always see me around the fire pit. And so I think you have to find a way to tend to your soul constantly, because you can't just continue to pour out. You have to tend to your soul and find ways to replenish yourself. And it needs to be a regular rhythm on your calendar, because if you don't, you're not going to do it.
Okay, Ricky, that's just a perfect segue into your new book that just was released recently, and you graciously sent me a signed copy in here. It says "Pull Up," which I appreciate that, and the 5 hazardous attitudes, ways to win the war within. And I read this. Fantastic book. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can integrate this into Stadia world to watch out for these attitudes. Yeah. What led you to write the 5 hazardous attitudes?
Absolutely. So the FAA requires us as pilots to know and understand 5 hazardous attitudes, because 86% of general aviation accidents that have resulted in death have one thing in common, one or more of the 5 hazardous attitudes. So what are they? It's anti-authority. It says, you can't tell me what to do. Okay. Then there's invulnerability. This is the person that says consequences happen. They'll never happen to me. You got macho. It's this overinflated sense of self-ability, and it causes people to take unnecessary risks. Then there's impulsivity. These are the people that constantly act before they think. And finally, resignation. It causes us to prematurely end what would have otherwise been fruitful. So it's only logical that if an attitude can crash an airplane, an attitude can crash a company, a career, a ministry, or marriage, a relationship. So I wrote 5 fables illustrating each of the 5 hazardous attitudes so that we can learn a costly lesson from the characters without having to pay for that hard lesson ourselves, because pilots aren't the only people who sometimes crash.
Oh, man. So, I mean, it's one of the things. So we went back, about a year and a half ago, we were seeing a lot of really public, lead pastors falling. And I mean, we've watched this over the years. And so I asked our team to go back, and I said, hey, go through historically through our church planters and in the United States specifically, and find out, what percentage of us, have they crashed the plane? Have they crashed the church? Right. Yeah. And we were very pleasantly surprised to find out that it was only a handful that we could identify that had crashed. And then we started asking, well, why is that with Stadia? And a lot of it has to do with our discovery process, which of course you're very familiar with. You're on Stadia's team for a while, and then the coaching they get and so forth. But let's do some coaching right now for church planters and multipliers. People are leading big. Some people are just getting their pilot's license. They're launching right now. Others are leading, jumbo jets right now. But I think these 5 hazardous attitudes apply to us all. Unpack anti-authority just a bit for us.
Yeah. So anti-authority, let me back up even a little more. As I did research for this book and began to interview psychologists, okay, oftentimes hazardous attitudes are due to unresolved trauma. Okay, so how do I illustrate that in chapter 1? Anti-authority is illustrated with a young man named Tony Decker, and his father, which was the greatest authority figure in his life, let him down in the worst way right when he was forming his beliefs around authority. Okay, so he carries that with him as a young man, and even as a middle-aged man. And so anti-authority is not verifying or just making sure that the rules and the instructions are proper. It's seeing rules as silly and frivolous. Okay, this can be everything from 10 items or less, and the express checkout line just doesn't apply to me.
I always count.
You count, all right. Or it could be a yellow traffic light is just a suggestion. And it could be my elders in my denomination or my group had me, sign something that I said I agreed to doctrinally, and I'm just going to disobey that. You know what I'm saying? Because, we baptized 300 people last weekend. Surely I ought to be able to do whatever I want to do. You see what I'm saying? Man. So anti-authority has a lot of different layers, but is characterized by seeing rules as silly and frivolous. And then also the root is often unresolved trauma. There's something that happened there that causes a person.
And so if we don't deal with that unresolved trauma, it's going to be a vicious cycle. Going to repeat.
It's going to repeat. Yep. And the thing is, yeah.
Go ahead, man.
It only hurts us. For example, you can go on YouTube right now and you can hear conversations of pilots arguing with air traffic controllers because they don't like the instructions they were given. But control is literally their name. Their job is to control the traffic in the air. And so when the unfortunate happens, are air traffic controllers in plane crashes? No, they're not. They're safe in the tower. So you need to obey the instructions that they give because it's going to make you be able to go home to your wife and kids. So that's how anti-authority works. It ends up.
I got to tell you, Ricky, I'm not going to go on YouTube and listen to those conversations of pilots arguing because I don't want to know that. Hey, this is fascinating because one of the questions I always ask if I'm interviewing someone to come on Team Stadia or when I was leading River Tree as a church leader, one of the questions I always ask in an interview, I'd say, "Hey, Ricky, tell me about your relationship with your dad." It's one of the most important interview questions. And sometimes people would say, I have a great relationship with my dad, and we'd move on. Other times they'd say, man, I don't have a relationship with my dad. And then we'd probe further to find out if they've gone through some therapy maybe, or if they've dealt with that spiritually on what that broken relationship might mean. And a lot of it has to do with anti-authority and how they're going to carry that into their career, church leadership, things like that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, invulnerability. I think that's one. It'll never happen to me, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's invulnerability shows up in ways that, it's Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick. He was known for that. But one day the light is going to go out, and it's going to go out at the most inopportune time. In ministry, I've seen this be from everything from, Crawford Loritz, he talks about how churches, when they have a lot of money coming in, they make the dumbest decisions. It's as though, it's coming in, it's going to keep coming in. Let's get a $150,000 LED wall, and I may have just hit a nerve right there. I know, but, if it's a wise purchase, great. It could be financial, or it could be for the leader. That first time that you get that DM and you decide to respond, you're acting as though you are invulnerable to consequence. And so, we just see this, play out in many different ways in ministry leaders' lives.
I think that, one of the most important pieces of advice we can give to any leaders, right, Ricky, is just by saying, hey, I'm quite capable of anything. As much as I want to say I'm invulnerable, the reality is if I'm not putting the correct boundaries in place, if I'm not, I'm not DMing, I'm just deleting, those kind of things, I am definitely capable of falling. And so constantly have to guard against that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful.
Okay, this next one's interesting to me because it's such a male, implying term, this idea of macho or machismo. So talk about this. And, we have a lot of female leaders and, that we work with these days, and females in business. So unpack that a little bit for both genders.
So that's very good. Actually, the example that I give in the book for chapter 3 is actually a female. And that was intentional. Okay. So macho again is this overinflated sense of self-ability that causes a person to say, I can do it. Right. And when is the recipe right for that? It's when there is an undervaluing opinion of you present. Okay. So I'll tell you a boneheaded thing I did, Greg, right? It's no secret that less than 1% of commercial pilots are African American. Okay. Is
that right? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
I just love unpacking these, kingdom diversity things too, Ricky.
Yeah. So long story short, this is something dumb I did. Do not do this. Okay. this guy was really giving me a hard time. He was a fellow flight instructor. I was a flight instructor, and he was just really busting my chops over a hard landing, right? Which, just like preaching, you're gonna have a bad sermon. As a pilot, you're gonna have a bad. You're gonna have a hard landing, yeah. So I got tired of him, Greg, and before I knew it, I challenged him to a landing contest.
Oh my! I don't want to be on your planes, man.
Right. Well, hey, I got to tell the truth, right? I can't come on here and act like I got it all together. This was years ago, but we didn't do the contest. You'll be happy to know. But what was happening there? There was an undervaluing opinion that was persistent, and it may not affect everybody, but there are some of us that will affect us in a way that causes us to say, "I can do it. I'm going to show you." And so for church planners, oh man, that might be the biggest one, especially because your buddy down the street on his launch day had 400 people. And if there's something in you that says, I can do it, you better check that real fast. Somebody baptized 200 the other weekend, and there's something in you that says, I can do it. Someone went to multi-site in under 2 years. I can do it. Somebody bought property, and they're got a building going up. I can do it. It's very easy to slip into that, and you got to watch out for that.
Man, that's just really good stuff. And I do think that, so in males, there's a male ego that plays out in for sure. In females, ladies, I hope you know how highly I value and how much Stadia empowers women in leadership, but I think you're put in a difficult place, especially sometimes because you have to compete in a world that, is male dominant. And so you could have that macho attitude of, I'm going to show them that a woman can do this. And that attitude in any of us gets us in trouble. Ricky, this next one is probably the one that I'm looking at. And when I was looking at your book, I'm going, yeah, that one's I need to be really careful of this one. The idea of impulsivity.
Yeah, if you are one step ahead of your people, you're a leader. If you're 2 steps ahead, you become a martyr.
Yep.
And so, this is for the guy that you planted and you changed the entire service at 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings twice a month. Hey, man, your people probably have whiplash. Now, if that's the spirit, great, but ask the spirit to speak on Wednesday or Thursday. There are leaders, and I've been a senior pastor, I've been a church planner. There are those of us, we get some brilliant idea on Sunday morning, and the whole tech team and production team has to pivot. And if that happens, fine. But if that's your norm, maybe you're impulsive. It's very hard to follow a leader that is impulsive.
Well, and I noticed it a lot. The area where I have to make is kind of envisioning expansion, because maybe it goes back to impulsivity combined with macho in this idea of, we need to replant more churches. We need to be working with more leaders. Yeah. And so now I start moving too fast before, doing the appropriate steps with our board, with our team, with thinking through the financial implications, right? Talk about, are there guardrails there for impulsivity? Yes. If someone is recognizing, like Greg Nettle, you're talking to Greg Nettle and saying, hey, here's some things I'd recommend for you, Greg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those guardrails or safety rails are people. It's the community around you. And so we have to be very careful to not see our safety rails as speed bumps. That's the, they're slowing me down. There's too much red tape, that kind of thing. And I think that once we see the community that God has blessed us with and the people around us as safety rails and not speed bumps, then man, life can really take on a new meaning as far as avoiding unnecessary setbacks.
Yeah, I think about the close friends. So, what encouraging leaders to have, really a fantastic elder or management team in place that you really do trust that can speak this kind of truth into your life.
Mm-hmm.
I've also had three really close friends in ministry over the years where I try to bounce stuff off, especially Ricky, when it comes to something like a career change, directional shift in life. It's not just going to affect you, but it's going to affect your entire organization.
Yes.
So what would you say? How many, give me magnitude of decision. So when you're flying, if you're just going to move 1 degree, maybe you don't need, I don't know, but if they're asking you to move 90 degrees, now you got a different kind of decision to make.
Well, here's the primary example in aviation. When you go into a simulator, they throw like 12 to 14 emergencies at you in an hour and a half. Wow. Okay. So what happens is they will kill one of your engines, and you are supposed to go through a series of checklists to secure the dead engine. And what impulsive pilots do is they inadvertently shut down the good engine.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So now 2 minus 2 equals 0. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
No good. Don't want to be on that plane.
So now it's all about calm and clarity. So when you're a leader, when you're a pastor, you're a church planner or a ministry leader, and an emergency arises, the last thing you want to do is be impulsive and shut down the good engine. Okay. And so what are the ways that we do that? We might dismiss, a team member, and we don't have all of the information yet. I've seen that happen at a church I was at. It wasn't until after a couple of weeks later that a person came forward and said, well, it wasn't fully like that when I said that. And it's like, oh, so now impulsivity, someone is unemployed, their reputation is damaged, and we didn't even have the right information. So that's a good example there. When you are in a stressed environment and an emergency arises, do you know that, let's say we're at altitude and we're flying and an emergency happens. On most checklists,
emergency happens.
Yep. On most checklists, the step 1 is do nothing. You're 36,000 feet above the ground. You know what I'm saying? Like, you've got time. Most of the time, the first step is do nothing, because you got to assess, see what light is lit up. Why is it lit up? You know what I'm saying? You don't immediately go pushing buttons and shutting stuff off. And that is easily applicable to ministry.
Okay, man. We could talk about these things all day, but the 5 hazardous attitudes is resignation. Talk about that, please.
So, this is the one that causes us to end or quit too soon, right? And I love this verse. It says that be not ye weary in well doing, for in due season you will reap your just reward if you faint not. So that lets me know that before there's a reaping season, there's a fainting season, right? That, night is darkest just before the dawn, And so how many of us have gotten right at the precipice, right there, where it was time to reap our harvest, and we stopped? I love this illustration. I'll wear it out. If we were to drive in our car to, say, from Atlanta to Nashville tonight, our headlights would not illuminate the entire way.
Right.
Only a few feet in front of us. But if we would just drive to what seems like the end of the illumination, what we'll find out is that there's more light there. And so that's the illustration of walking with Jesus. You put one step in front of the other and do it again and do it again and do it again. And what you'll find out when you get to what looks like the end of the illumination, what you'll find out is there's more light there. And if you keep on doing it, you're going to be at your destination. So we got to take heart and don't give up too soon.
Do not grow weary in doing good. I just love that. And we all know that church leadership, multiplication, leadership of anything, I always tell people, if anybody could do it, anybody would. And the reality is God's called you to whatever leadership role you have. And you really have to carry, there's a weight you carry. There's a, hey, we've got to keep the team moving that you carry. And, that comes from your call, from that inner strength that you're doing what God's doing. But man, I having been there, man, we both know, and I think everybody listening, we know what it's like to be at that dark place. And I just want to say this, sometimes there are times when we will enter the greatest darkness in leadership precisely because we are following what God has called us to do. I think that this idea of, Jesus on the cross, the temple curtain is ripped in two, darkness falls upon the earth from noon till 3. Yes. Why did all that happen? Why is Jesus going through that? Not because he did something wrong, but precisely because he's at the place that God called him to. He's being faithful to do the will of his Father. And there are times in leadership, and we will not get to the resurrection. We will not get to the light, to the other side, if we don't keep going through that darkness.
Yeah. That's so good.
That'll preach, brother.
Yes, indeed. It did.
Okay. So we got the 5 Hazardous Attitudes, Ways to Win the War Within by Ricky Brown, the book. And there's a workbook study guide that goes with that as well. Ricky, how can people access this?
Yeah, so the easiest way is rickybrown.org, and to, check out my site. I speak to corporations and congregations about leadership and self-awareness. And so the book is sold on Audible, Barnes & Noble's, Amazon, and everywhere books are sold.
Okay, rickybrown.com. And
ORG.
Okay, rickybrown.org. ORG. Don't mess that up. rickybrown.org. And Ricky, I was looking at you, man. You've been speaking all over the world on this subject, quite literally a bunch of different countries. You're speaking at for-profits and not-for-profits. And I love what you're doing in the leadership space, bringing these what I would call aviation principles, but also leadership principles. Most importantly, I think they're all biblical principles into leadership.
Oh, yeah.
So appreciate you, Ricky. Thanks for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.